All right. So thank you all for being here. I always say to myself, for an after school group, which this is an after school group, I better have a very perky pace because you've already had a long day, and I better be certain there's things that are useful for you. So again, I love that you have joined together as three school districts, all very desirous of improving the learning of children at your school. So this is our third session, and we have many more to go. And if ever you have certain content that you want covered, just email me at archerteach@aol.com and say, would you please cover this? Well, this is September 22nd. I don't know about you, but already didn't 2021 seem like it's going so fast? And we're going to actually talk about today about my favorite topic because the delivery of instruction is so critical. We could have an excellent curriculum and not deliver it in a way that maintains attention and learning. And we're going to hone in on the most important aspect of delivery, which is, I'm certain, something you've already worked on personally, and that is increasing opportunities to respond. If we were to pick one measure of what is going to indicate probable learning within your classroom, it would be the number of responses that the teacher requests, the opportunities to respond. And every time we meet, our motto is the truth. How well you teach equals how well they learn, and how well they learn equals how well you taught. So now, this is related to the book on explicit instruction. And we're going to have lots of active participation. And first of all, maybe you kept it, maybe you didn't, but you need a response sheet. And I'm hoping that you're maybe even considering using that response sheet with your students. So while we go through the active participation, create one of those. And here's what we're going to do. Number one, I would like you on a piece of paper to write down best practices, just like I'm going to do right now. And if there is a practice that you say, I'd really like to incorporate that into my intervention classes, I'd really like to utilize this with my third graders in reading and language arts and math. This would be very helpful when I teach fifth grade social studies. You're going to add it to a list, sort of your personal to-do list. But at the end of the time together, you're going to write down takeaways, and that'll come directly from your best practice list. What else are we going to do? Well, I have to tell you, I hope that you will never have to return to doing online lessons. And some of you had more of it last year than other school districts. But we're going to use the same active participation that you could use in your classroom or online. So when there are short core responses, if I was in the classroom, I could say everyone and have them say it together. But because we can't sync our voices, you're going to be muted. But I want to remind you again that the very best active participation is overt, not just covert in our head. And so even here, I'm going to ask you to say the answers out loud, just because to remind you that by doing that with students, not just think about the answer, but say the answer or whisper the answer to yourself makes it much more powerful. Overt responses make a difference. And if I was in the classroom, we would read things often together. We'd read slides together. We'd read the titles together. We might read the initial paragraphs together. But again, because of the problem of syncing our voices, you're going to be muted, but reading it out loud. If I was in your class, I would also use closed reading I read stop and they say the next word. And we would also have a response sheet. I'm telling you, if you can get in the habit of having this in the student's desk, pull out your response sheet, put up true and false. I'm going to review what we learned in science yesterday, and you are going to say if that statement's true or false. And then you're going to tell your partner why you believe it was either true or false. So, and we're going to use agree and disagree today. And in some cases, you're going to show answers by holding up fingers. Just remember, as we look at opportunities to respond, the power of hold-ups. You hold up the response sheet, you hold up your fingers, you hold up your whiteboard. Has some of the very best research in terms of making a difference in learning in any domain. And you're going to have written responses. Yes, you're going to write down your best practices. And questions will go into the chat box that's to Loretta. And Loretta, you will be then collecting them. And we will have a question and answer at the end of our time. Good, Loretta? Excellent. Okay. Always helpful to remember our universal goal. Now, last week, I had the great gift of, from Portland, Oregon, working with schools that were in Lincoln, Nebraska. And I got to watch 9 teachers teach. It is in the schools that have significantly, through explicit instruction, improved the outcomes in all content areas with their students. And it was because they kept a consistent eye on learning and looked at what in their teaching could increase learning. And that is the goal of our whole series, is to look at the relationship of teaching to learning. So in the first 2 sessions, we covered numerous things in teaching that makes a difference in terms of learning. Does the teacher focus on critical content? Does the teacher break it down into obtainable pieces in terms of the design of instruction? Does the teacher have organized and focused lessons? Does the teacher tell the kids the goal of the lesson? Does a teacher review what's been taught before? That makes a difference, particularly using retrieval practice. Does a teacher use I do it, we do it, you do it? Does the teacher have what we're going to talk about today, the delivery skills that increases learning and maintains attention? And is there an adequate amount of practice also? Now, every time we meet, we are going to do a retrieval practice of the 13 elements that we introduced in session 1, reviewed in session 2, and we're going to do a 2-minute recall. So you have a piece of paper, need some, don't put it on the best practice list, another piece of paper, and you're going to list these words: content, design, delivery, and practice. And it might look something like this. I'm going to put mine down. And I gave you a little extra hint today because there were 2 elements under content. And under design, this is sort of extra scaffolding: 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and number 8. And then we had delivery, which is number 9, 10, 11, and 12. I tell you, number 9 is getting frequent responses. So already I've given you some hints. If you were listening when I went over teaching and learning, I gave you some more hints. And then practice, I'm going to give it to you. I'm such a generous person today. But the big idea is that it be judicious, which means enough for them to remember it. Okay, so your job is to add to these, and you are going to do it with retrieval, and then you'll get feedback. If I just went through them again every time we met, just did a recap, then its power would be far less than if I did retrieval. So in terms of learning, which is definitely our goal, and also to remind you about when you wrote down your favorite thing from last time, it was retrieval practice. And so it's a reminder to continue to teach and give rehearsal, but then to have kids retrieve the information. I'm hoping you're all set. My timer is set for 2 minutes. All right, getting ready, and go. And someone needs to mute. All right, stopping there. And you have many more times to practice this. So, you could even practice before we meet next time, but let's do a self-check. And so as I go through them, look at your own list. So the content we want is critical, that we put our attention on what's going to make the most difference in terms of children's attainment. And if something is complex, particularly, we're going to break it down very systematically so that the students don't have cognitive overload. And our lessons, I am certain that this would be true if I walked into your classroom, that they'd be very organized and focused lessons. I could tell exactly what the students are to learn, and there would be a structure, such as a opening, a body, and a close. And embedded in that lesson, we tell the students the goal, whether you call it a target or an objective or I can statement, they know what they're to learn. And we'd have review. And review of what we've taught in the past, or review of vocabulary we've introduced in the past, or review of pre-skills that we've taught in the past needed for today's lesson. But the big idea on review is that it would involve retrieval. You have to retrieve information from your mind. And then we had the big steps of demonstration, or I do, guided practice, we do, or checking for understanding, and you're ready for independent work, you do. And last time we looked at it in terms of strategies, where we did a demonstration of the strategy, telling them what they needed to do, and showing them, so show and tell, and then guiding them step by step, and then having them do it on their own. And today, And next time, we're focusing on delivery. Today on frequent responses, or opportunities to respond as it's referred to in research. And then we look carefully at their responses so we can give them feedback. And we could correct it if it's error. We could give them information to improve their response, or we could give them affirmation or praise. And our pace moves along. It's pretty perky. And we have practice that is enough so that the students can retain the information. So those are our big overarching elements. And today we're going to work on frequent responses. And so our goals are that we would examine the elements related to delivery of explicit instruction with focus on what? Opportunities to respond. And my hope would be that you, in collaboration with other teachers in your department, other teachers in your grade level, would think, well, what kind of practices and procedures could we be using at our school site? There's all kinds of details in this, and you don't have to do everything, but you have to do some things that will make for more responses in your class. And in this case, the details really make a difference. How you do partners, how you do choral responses, how you do response sheets. All right, so I hope that you will gain as much as I had fun organizing this for you. And so we are looking at delivery of instruction and focusing on frequent responses or opportunities to respond. Now, all of you are currently teachers or have been teachers, and so this question is one that you totally resonate with. So follow the cursor, read it out loud, and go. Why is it important to frequently elicit responses from students in any lesson? Whether I teach art, or I teach music, or I teach third grade or fifth grade or intervention, no matter what place it is, I am going to get frequent responses. And so you're going to have your scratch paper out and ready to go. You're going to have 2 minutes to write down and do a brain drain. You don't have to write out sentences. You can just make a list of why would it be important to elicit frequent responses. What would be the result? So when I say go, I'm going to put down, okay, I get to, I'm going to say on task. The students are more likely to be on task. Okay, getting ready and go. So one reason we just did a brain drain was to get your ideas down. But another reason was to show you how much can be done in like 2 minutes of thoughtfulness by students. So doing a brain drain, giving a specific amount of time, like a minute or 2 minutes, you really are quite amazed about when they're focused, how much they might get written down. And so I would like you to look down your list and pick 1 or 2 reasons why eliciting frequent responses is important, and plop that into the chat box. I'm going to wait a minute before I open it up so you have time to get it in. Okay, I see some themes here as I am looking through this. Let me just start right there. Tracy said, you know, if they're learning the content. So there's feedback to the teacher. And many of you had that there's going to be more student engagement. Becky said it keeps them focused on the critical content. And another idea was that it is a check for understanding. Again, a number of you had that one. And the 3rd grade team says they're going to be more engaged. And because they're rehearsing it, there's more recall. So what you said there inadvertently is more learning. And let me just open up my chat box. And again, more checking for understanding, engagement, checking understanding and engagement, checking students would be more engaged. So the big things that I saw was that more on task, more engaged, a check for understanding, that then we could adjust our lesson. Excellent job. I love this one, that the students are going to be more confident, because if they've made responses and got positive feedback, they're much more confident about their own learning. Terrific. So you know exactly why. Now, I did this same act with you today, and I want to tell you there's one word that I wanted to see more often, and that is this one. This is the main reason that we get responses. It is to increase learning. Everything we're doing in this series is, what do we do that makes a difference in terms of learning? And the words recall and retention meant that some of you were thinking about learning. So here's what I did. So be actively engaged. I did the same kind of brain drain and put it into categories. So I thought that if we get a lot of responses, it definitely helps establish a positive learning environment. And so the students have more engagement, they're more on task, they're more accountable. That's really important because some kids sort of want to sort of slide by with a passive in classes. But if they're meant to and required to respond, I can hold them accountable for their learning. And it increases appropriate behavior and reduces inappropriate behavior. You cannot simultaneously interrupt class and be saying an answer. So we have data to show that is exactly what happens. Positive behaviors go up, inappropriate behaviors go down. And it just keeps the class moving along, even in our webinars after school. I better get some responses from you to keep things moving. But It's also, as many of you said, it's a check for understanding. It is embedded formative assessment. It's a check for understanding. So I can monitor those responses and adjust my lesson. Do we need to go ahead? Do we need to repeat that? Do I need to firm that up? And also, it is an opportunity to give feedback to the students. And the feedback might be praise, it might be corrections, it might be informative. And we have, this is the biggest idea though, and that is it promotes learning because it focuses, as you said, focuses students' attention on critical content, provides them necessary practice and rehearsal, and it also can have retrieval practice, learning, learning, learning. That's the major reason for opportunities to respond. Now, Loretta, I'm just going to do a little check here. I do not see that this is being recorded, and I know some people aren't here. Can you check on that?
I have a little dot at the top that says recording.
Well, excellent. I guess I missed the little red dot and now I see it. Thank you, Loretta. All right. So we're going to start actually with some summative research that was done on how to improve the questions we ask in order to get responses. And in Dylan Williams' book, Embedded Formative Assessment, it's a thriller. But I particularly plucked out this one review, that there were 3 simple ways that we could improve the questions we ask, and thus the learning that obtained. And so one of them is simply to focus on why. So instead of asking what in punctuation should be used, we might ask what in punctuation should be used, why should the sentence end in a question mark, constantly following up with why. Is this a sentence or a clause? Why is this a clause rather than a sentence? Is slate a metamorphic rock? Why is slate a metamorphic rock? Now, this is so important that when I worked in one large school district, Wichita, Kansas, we actually put at the back of the room reminders for the teachers. One of them I introduced last time, does it make sense? We put that sign up. We also put up opportunities to respond to remind teachers to have many opportunities to respond, but we had a big sign that said, why? Because I could say it should end in a question mark, good guess, but to say why is going to help the generalization of that information. So why? What else? Well, another thing that we could do is constantly ask for comparisons. Now, if you follow the work by Robert Marzano and his research team, they found that one of the most critical things that teachers did that helped with higher order thinking was constantly asking for comparisons. And so now I am just definitely into following up with comparisons. And so we're going to send some materials to you on opportunities to respond, but I'm also going to send you the manual that was written by the team on how to do comparisons. But I could, in a math class, ask, what is a prime number? But I could make it, my original question, much stronger by asking for a comparison. Why is 17 prime and 15 not? Well, 17 is prime because it is divisible only by 1 and itself. And 15, yes, it's divisible by 1 and by 15, but also by 3 and 5. So it is not a prime number. So comparisons constantly are helpful. This one I added because this is from a lesson that I taught 2 weeks ago. And we were comparing dolphins and sharks. And I could have asked, is a dolphin a mammal? Or I could ask, why is a dolphin a mammal and a shark not. Now we really have to hone in on the attributes of a mammal. This one came from a social studies lesson that we were teaching the term suffrage. I could have asked, what is suffrage? The right to vote. But instead, I said, at the end of after we had done the instruction, I asked, how is suffrage different from legislation? Well, suffrage is the right to vote, and it came about through legislation. And how are suffrage and legislation similar? Both of them are talking about aspects of our government. Both of them are talking about aspects of democracy. You see how this takes it up a notch, just like why, doing compare and contrast does the same thing. Now, the third one was particularly useful for our students who are in 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, particularly those 5th graders who love arguing, where instead of asking a question, we get in the habit of giving them a statement that they have to agree or disagree with. So let me just go down to this one from a lesson I did in science. Is plywood a natural resource? I could have asked that and they could say, yes, it was a natural resource. Then I could ask, why is it a natural resource? But that day I gave them statements. Plywood is a natural resource. And they had to come up with, did they agree or disagree and why? And I actually used a response sheet. So plywood is a natural resource. And then the students showed it, and I hope you knew that to disagree. And then they had to tell their partner, I disagree, and this is why. Again, a more compelling way to answer questions. So maybe pick one of those to really hone in on. Why, using compare and contrast, or agree, disagree statements, but then also why or why not. All right. Well, when we looked at and brainstormed why we might want to get frequent responses, that was our opinions, but let's look at the research. And this is an area that has tremendous amount of research. So I'm going to send and have posted for you some articles that summarize the research. But here's the main thing about the research studies is that they have very clear and consistent results. And just like your long brainstorm list, these are the ones that emerged from the research that were studied. So as the responses go up, so does on-task behavior. As the responses go up, so does learning. That's our goal. As the responses go up, inappropriate behavior goes down. But now we have many interventionists here, and you should know that if I want to increase the power of intervention, the intensity of intervention, I'm going to increase the number of responses. So we know that these are exactly what K-5 teachers would want: on-task students, optimum learning, reduction of disruptive behaviors, and when they did intervention, it increased the outcomes and the intensity of the intervention. Now, there has been some other questions that have been asked. For example, one question that was asked in 2 major studies at different times was, if I watch expert teachers, what I call value-added teachers, who had very high outcomes from their students in terms of learning, what is their balance between unison responses? Everybody says it, everybody writes it, everybody does it, versus calling on individual students. And both of them agreed that the far majority of responses in the classes that were making the most gains were universal. Everyone says it, everybody writes it, everybody does it. But they still called on individuals. Now, I'm going to recommend that you call on non-volunteers, because every one of the school districts represented here are working on equity, and the least equitable practice is having kids volunteer. Because I end up on calling then on the highest performing student. I call on the student that's most assertive. I call on students who are most facile, better at English. So it's what I call teaching the best and leaving the rest. So the first thing I always recommend in terms of opportunities to respond is the school works on no non-volunteers. Just say no to volunteers. Now, how can we make this even better? Well, if I first had you say the answer to a partner and then called on you, I'm setting you up for success. If I first have you write down the answer and then I call on you, again, I've set you up for success when I call on you. So if we use individual responses, it's useful to be certain that the students have a higher probability of a correct response. All right, what else do we know? Now, I'm going to introduce this one with just a little caution because we need to use this very flexible, this data. But in 2 meta-analyses, they asked this question: what rate of response do very, very effective teachers get? Okay, and so it's just a guideline, and there may be things embedded in the lesson that makes that different for your domain or your teaching, but this was the finding, that effective teachers who had the most gains in their lessons, when they requested simple responses, for example, everyone say it, or everyone gesture, or everyone hold up the response card, that the teachers didn't get one response only per period or 2. They actually got 3 to 5 opportunities to respond per minute. So all the future videos that we're going to look at, we will take data to see if we are meeting that kind of goal. Sometimes, though, the responses we're requesting are more complex. Say this answer to your partner using this sentence stem, or write down in a sentence your answer to this question, or write down this math problem on your whiteboard and hold it up. But even there, those very effective teachers had 1 opportunity to respond per minute. The main thing that is, this is very different than 1 response per period. This is many responses per minute, or at least 1 response per minute in any lesson that we teach. And does it make a difference? Absolutely. Remember the outcomes. The students learn more on task, and fewer management problems. So we're going to watch a little video. And as we watch this video, I'm going to ask these people to do something for me. And so Laura, Kimberly, Loretta, Becky, Michelle, and Tabitha, you're going to take data on the number of responses. So you're going to tabulate the number of responses that are requested of students. So if they say something together, you're going to tabulate that. If they say something to partners, if they are called on individually, if they read something, you're going to tally. Okay, you might even put them in categories if you wish, like choral responses, partner response, and so forth. We're going to do this as a whole group in our next sessions, but today those individuals are going to take that data. All right, and what are all the rest of us doing? Well, you're going to, again, you need scratch paper here. You're going to write down any good practices that you observe. And This has some good practices that are ones that are behavioral management, as well as good practices, because I'm teaching them how to participate in class. So any good practices, and then afterwards, you're going to pick out your best ones, and when we're all done, putting those on the chat. 2 jobs: take data and record high leverage practices. Okay, let's see if we can pull up. Okay, and Sharon, and excellent. Thumb up from Loretta if you can see this on the screen. Excellent. Okay, so this is a lesson that I am teaching to 2nd grade. And it's very short, but it's teaching them how to participate in class. All right.
My name is Dr. Archer, and today I have the gift of teaching your reading program. I am so lucky. And one of the things we're doing today, and I'll tell you why I'm here, hand down for a moment, is that maybe there's something I do that will be useful to some other teachers. So I want you to turn and wave at those teachers, wave at the principal. Now, some teachers aren't here, but they want to watch this lesson. So that is why the video is here for those teachers. Wave at the video, wave at the video. But now that we have honored them, acknowledged them, eyes up here, because you will never look at the video or the teachers again. All your eyes will be on me.
So that represents probably my favorite management law, which is if you expect it, pre-correct it. Everybody say it. If you expect it, pre-correct it. This really is the most positive, proactive management tool we have. If I'm in 2nd grade and in the back of the room is the principal and teachers and Dima, my videographer, is it possible that they would turn and keep looking at them? Of course. So I can't wait till they're doing it. I know it's going to happen, so I'm going to correct it beforehand. It is, whether you are a parent or a teacher or a paraeducator, this is the cutting edge rule of management. If you expect it, pre-correct it.
All right, perfect. Now, if I pick up your pencil and I move it, I want you to go where your pencil is going. Okay.
Okay, another little management rule is how to avoid power struggles. Now, many children like their territory, don't want to move. And so what I did is I gave a clear directive. But after I gave the clear directive, I removed my energy from him so that he had an opportunity to make a good decision. And when I remove my energy, it sends a message. I know you're going to do this. I expect you're going to do it, and you're going to do it. I don't give them a stare down, because that leads directly to a power struggle. So it's all these little management skills that we learn to embed in our teaching that really do make a difference in terms of management.
Oh, looking up here. Now, you are in what grade, everyone? 2nd. Boy, by the time you're in 2nd grade, you've had many different teachers. And as a result, you have many different things you've learned. So I got to take a minute to teach you how to be my students. First thing, when I teach, I need to have you sitting up. Boy, you're sitting right up, not standing up, but sitting up, and not slumped over, but sitting up. Perfect. Excellent. Good job. And you need to be looking right at me. Oh, good job looking here. And you need to look as smart as you can. Oh, a smile. That was a smart touch. Oh, very good. Oh, hands folded on your desk. That is very smart. Nodding. You know, that shows you're paying attention. Excellent. Ooh, looking very good. So everybody hang out for just a moment. Lean over, hang out. When I say ready, I want you to sit up, look at me, and look as smart as you can. 1, 2, 3, ready? You're ready? You're ready? You're ready? Hang out one more time. And 1, 2, 3, ready? You're perfect. You're perfect. Excellent. Now, here's something I do that may be a little bit different than your teacher, and that is when I ask a question, students in my class don't raise their hands. So when I ask a question, are you going to raise your hands? Yes or no, everyone? No, unless I say, raise your hand. So everybody raise your hand. Then you can do that. But here's what we're going to do instead. When the answers are very short, we're going to say the answers together. I'll ask a question. I will put up my hands. This says think, do not blurt. And when I lower my hands right there, you'll say the answer. Got it? Okay, ooh, good job. Sit up. So get ready.
So there you might have noticed the use of physical proximity to help a student make a new decision. And so he's a chair rocker. I didn't call him out on it. I just gently moved in. He put them 4 on the floor, and I praised him for doing that. So just the power of having unintrusive management.
So everybody, what day of the week is it? Everyone, it's?
November.
The day of the week is Friday. Oh, I can't believe you'd forget that. Let's try it again. So what day of the week is it? Think.
Friday.
Think. Everyone, Friday. Now let's practice that again. This is think. You don't say it until I lower my hands right there, okay? So what day of the week is it, everybody? It's?
Friday.
All right. Of course, tomorrow it will be?
Saturday.
I didn't fool you. After Saturday?
Sunday.
Perfect. That gives everybody a chance to think. You are so good. Now, sometimes you're going to say an answer to a partner, and I'm going to give you a partner. Whoever your partner is, I expect you to be very kind to them. And you're number 1. This is your partner number 2. And let's put your pencil up in the pencil home. Can you do that right there? And oh, excellent job. Perfect. You're number 1, partner number 2. And looking here, it will help me if you will come on this side and sit. So you're next to your partner, not across. So you stay, sit. She's coming here. Okay, perfect. So you're number 1, partner number 2. And you're Adam, number 1. Partner number 2. And looking here, you're number 1, partner number 2. You're number 1, partner number 2. And Daniel, would you take your chair and put it right here? Yeah, that was a good decision. And you're number 1. When he gets there, he's number 2. Okay, thank you, Daniel. I'll just put that right there for you. So everybody, you know your number. Raise your hand if you're a 1. Raise your hand if you're a 2. Raise your hand if you're a 1. Raise your hand if you're a 2. Raise your hand if you're a 1. Raise your hand if you're a 1. Oh, all right. So here's what you're going to do when you say answers to a partner. If you were my partner, I'd look at my partner, lean towards my partner, and whisper. Look, lean, whisper. Say it, everybody. Look, lean, whisper. 1s, pretend you're saying an answer to a partner. Let me see what you'd look like. Looking, leaning, whispering, looking, leaning, whispering, looking, leaning, whispering. Yes. 2s, pretend you're saying an answer. Show me what you look like. Looking, leaning. Oh, perfect. Whispering, looking. Yes, leaning, whispering. Wonderful.
All right. So if you were doing the counting of opportunities to respond to make a total, and I'll call on you in a moment, if you put down good practices that you watched that were either behavioral practices or were instructional practices, add those to your two best ones to the chat box. Do that now. And if you counted, put in your number, your total. Oh, excuse me, it was 6 minutes long, and let me see if that's right. 6 minutes is good. And so put in the average number per minute. This is a little seminal review. Okay. All right. And let's look at the chat box and what we have there. So, very clear expectations, having proximity to the students, and Tabitha had 20 responses, so and of total, and moving using a gentle redirection for the students. 3 to 4 per minute. Now that's what I had was 24 responses, and that would be 4 per minute. So Michelle, we are agreeing. Modeling and setting the goal of the lesson, Becky, acknowledging the elephant in the room, which is everybody who's at the back of the room, pre-teaching the expectations of opportunities to respond and practicing it with students. And this one, Tina, I'm going to say was probably the most important, is not creating a suicide, not assuming that they're second graders, that they already know how to work with partners, they already know how to do choral responses, but instead directly teaching it, showing them how to do it, telling them how to do it, just as we discussed last time, and then providing practice so that they could do it. All right, so once again, you did very well. And let me just hit the big ideas that I wrote down in giving feedback to this teacher. Now, I've worked with her for 55 years, and she still has room to grow in terms of her teaching. But I always look for the big P's. Are you prepared? Are you present in the room, not letting your thoughts go other places, not answering the phone, not looking at your watch, not checking out messages on your iPhone? Are you present? And is the pace perky so it moves along? That was quite a bit we covered in 6 minutes. Are you passionate about teaching? Are you passionate about the content? Oh yeah, I really want them to be able to follow my directives for the whole year on active participation. Am I positive? We didn't take data on that, but I'm sure it's more than the 4-to-1 ratio that you're using as your positive behavioral support and intervention systems. So the P's and clarity. So they knew the purpose of the lesson, to know how to be my students and know how to participate. The expectation that they participate was very clear. The explanations were clear, the demonstrations were clear, and the feedback was clear. So clarity, 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 the power of the verbal communications. And these are some slogans or mottos that I've used for a long time that we saw here. If you expect it, pre-correct it. And constantly, it would be useful if we remembered that. Sometimes I want to stop people in the grocery store pre-pandemic. I haven't been in the grocery store lately, but who are telling their children, don't touch that, don't do that, don't do this. And I just wish I could take them outside of the grocery store and say, now, when we go into the grocery store, you'll be riding in the cart, Jason, and sometimes I'm going to have you help me by getting something and putting it in our cart. But only when I ask you. We're not going to touch everything else. And we could pre-correct it before we go in, and that would be so much sweeter. And the pace is perky. So I've always said, avoid the void, for they will fill it. When we've looked at lessons being taught and looked at the videos, we often find that when there is a void, children do fill it, and not always with the behavior we wish. And then my final one I wrote down for this one was predictability predicts ability. Basically, that's saying, let us have routines. Let us have behavioral routines and practices. Like the young man who I reminded him, having watched the teacher teach, to put his pencil in the pencil home. It was a routine the teachers taught, so it was very predictable. And as I watched that video, there were opportunities to respond. First of all, no hand raising to get rid of volunteers. Choral responses. Now, here's what's interesting. I had to teach it to them and practice. It actually took 7 trials to get them to do it accurately. But the very first time I said, what day of the week is it? And Adam shouted out, November. And everybody in the class said, November. It was so delightful. And so then when I practiced it, they got down that this was think and this was say it. And if I had chosen not to teach that, not to practice it to mastery, and we probably would review it for many days, then all year long, I might not have beautiful choral music of them saying it together. So it really behooves us to teach these things that we're going to use to mastery. And we had partners, which I selected the partners, gave them a number so that no one could dominate. And I did a pre-correction. I expect you to be very kind to your partner, anticipating that some kids would go, ugh. No, we don't do that as people in a learning community. I verified their numbers. So I'm checking understanding of the directions and then taught them to look, lean, and whisper. But I didn't just tell them. We then practiced it. All right. So even here, while I'm teaching them how to respond with opportunities to respond in class, even in that lesson, we got an average of 4 responses per minute. That just proves the point. Let us get frequent responses. Well, if I was coming into your class, or your principal or your coaches were, I would tell them, these are the things you want to look for, the big ideas about active participation. Number 1, the teacher should be getting frequent responses. So we already looked at that, 3 to 5, if the responses are quite simple. If they're more complex, at least 1 response per minute, and even more in intervention till it becomes intensified. And whenever possible, everyone writes it, everyone says it, everyone does it. And this is very important. Active participation to work well has to be quite structured. Because, and let me just give you some examples from that video. So a number of studies have looked at choral responses, verbal responses. And they found if the teacher, on one hand, just allows shout outs, versus have it structured with a cue for them to say the answer, the difference in outcomes is significant. Because if the teacher just allows random shout outs, the stronger students are likely to say the answers and the others to mimic them. So reducing the amount of learning. But if there is a definite signal, and it doesn't have to be this one, but it could be think and say, or think and say, any cue, then it had great power in terms of outcomes. Same with the partners. I gave them a number because if I just say turn and talk, then the more dominant student's going to do all the talking and we won't have equity. But if I say ones tell your partner, then twos tell your partner, we increase the equity. So we get frequent responses. We involve all students for the majority of responses, though we could call on some students, but less often. And it's structured. And also, it gives the students adequate think or preparation time. And I've always just called it thinking time, but now I'm really working on preparation. And I'll just share with you one thing that I observed this week when I was in Lincoln, Nebraska, virtually. So one teacher said, here is the statement, the three branches of the federal government are, put your hand over your mask, and I want you to say to yourself the answer. So the teachers were having the kids actually prepare their answer by talking into their mask. And the teacher said, but I haven't put their hand over the mask because later when the mask is gone, I'm still going to have them talking to your hand. Very cool. Okay, so looking at these for a moment, put up 4 fingers. I'm just going to model another way to get active participation. Okay, wherever you are, you're muted, but say it out loud. We get what? Frequent responses. And it involves all students and is structured and allows thinking or preparation time. So this is another thing I'm doing all the time in elementary classes, is having the kids put up their fingers and rehearse the answer and then retrieve the answer after we've practiced it. It may seem silly to you, but it's not at all silly. It is exactly what we do when we are personally trying to remember something. I need to do this, then I need to do this, then I need to do this, then I need to do this. Making it overt. Okay, so the research on think time I find is really interesting. There's not a lot of studies, but there was a very large study where they recorded lessons at the elementary level and recorded and recorded and recorded thousands of lessons. And then they looked at when the teacher asked a question, and then how many seconds did it take them to call on someone, and what was the quality of the answer given by that student. And so when the thinking time or preparation time was 3 seconds or more, particularly on higher order questions, the results were more kids participated. The responses when called on were longer. They included evidence. Their answers were more logical, and they had more follow-up questions. Very positive things by giving them on higher order questions, particularly more think time. Well, get out your agree and disagree, a little firm up, and put it in front of you. And when I say show me, hold it up and put it in the camera. So everybody open up their cameras. Excellent. Okay, number 1. I'm going to read it. You're going to touch, agree or disagree. Then you're going to hold it up. The benefits of increasing opportunities to respond include increased time on task, increased learning, and reduced disruptive behaviors. Put your finger on agree or disagree and show me. Excellent. Thank you, Loretta. Jania, excellent. Thank you, Lisa. And if I was in a class, I would then say, 1s, tell your partner why you agree. And number 2, and read it as I move the cursor, but remain muted. When examining opportunities to respond within a lesson, we should have frequent responses that involve all students and provide adequate think time. Touch it and show me. Excellent. Agree, 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 agree. Perfect. Okay. And number 3. And reading it with me. When requesting responses during a lesson, 2 to 4 responses per session would be adequate. Yes, Michelle. And yes, Becky, disagree. Maybe 2 to 4 in a minute, but not 2 to 4 in 30 minutes. And putting that aside, so we are going to look at different ways to get responses. And one way to organize this is I could have you say something, a verbal response. I could have you write something, a written response. I could have you do an action, a doing response. So that is exactly how we're going to organize it. Here's what I would like you to do before we even leap on this, though. And that is, I want you to pop into the chat box and put what are the most probable ways you get responses right now. So you might say, well, I get choral responses, I use whiteboards, and I'm using response sheets because I like them. Or I have discussions and so forth. So I'm just very curious about what your current practice is. So add that to the chat box. Okay, so currently, let me just get here. This is exactly what I expected, that this was going to firm you up, but you're already doing things. We have whiteboards, we have elbow partners, we put thumbs up, thumbs down, agree or disagree. For short responses, we say answers, and I also use choral responses and thumbs up and down, partner responses. On the command of everyone, Michelle says they say an answer. I use whiteboards in my classroom, whiteboards, verbal responses, fingers to show answers, Becky said. Holly says, I have agree, disagree, or a verbal and an action. And thumbs up, thumbs down, choral responses, whiteboards, 4 corners for discussion, and write on your dry erase board, and verbal responses. Beautiful. 2 choices. One, go to this side of the room for one choice, this side of the room for another choice. So we stand up, sit down, stand if you agree, sit down if you disagree, touch your nose, touch your head. So here's what I see, that already you have an array of possibilities. And today we're going to use our last time to look at some of these, and then we will continue this as we look at more delivery skills next time we meet. Thank you very much. Okay, so many of you wrote down that you utilized choral responses. So we're going to look first at verbal responses, and you used choral responses. Now I'm going to put as one of the articles, and you might just read the abstract because it's like 50 pages long, but it was a big review of research on choral responses, unison choral responses. And the researchers concluded that if all American teachers, when answers were short and the same, would have the students answer together, that across the country, we'd significantly increase the outcomes in our classes. And so the only challenge, though, is if I don't have a cue, I can have blurters in the classroom. So I need a cue to keep them together. And you saw what I taught them on the video. I asked a question. I put up my hands to give them think time. And then I said, everyone, and lowered my hands. And that's sort of like being an orchestra or band teacher guiding the students together. But I just have to do it very consistently. Now, some teachers prefer using an auditory signal. For example, everyone. They might say it with the signal, everyone, or just say everyone. So just last week when I was watching 9 elementary teachers, one teacher had a small intervention group and would say everyone, and the students would then say it word, word, if they're having them read the words, or answer to your math problem, and they use an auditory signal. A number of teachers who were teaching early decoding used a clicker. And so they would point and say sound, click, and the students would all say it on the click. Sound, click, sound, click, sound, click. And it doesn't matter which one you pick. What matters is, does everybody say it together? So that we're getting the benefit of significantly increasing the responses. Because if I have 20 children and I call on them one by one, every child makes one response. But if I click and you say it together, then everybody's making 20 responses. No wonder choral responses make a difference, because it increases the number of opportunities to respond for each child. Well, if they are looking down at a book, just let me go back here, or something on their desk, even if this is your normal cue, you can't use it because they're looking down. So you have to use everyone, or click some auditory signal. Now, here's the major challenge that we have with choral responses. You have to give them, like on all responses, enough think time. And how might you do that? How do you figure out the amount of think time? Well, one I use is put your thumb up when you have the answer, and then I will signal for the answer. So if they're looking down at their book and reading words, and I say what word, put your thumb up when you have it and say it. So they could indicate think time. And what to do if they have some students who do not say the answer. Well, we found it was useful to do what we called a gentle redo. Ooh, I need everyone. Oh, I still need everyone. Oh, double darnette, I need everyone. So a very simple way just to repeat it. And then the kids will help you out. Ryan, say it. So choral responses we can use often as long as the answer is short and the same. Now, many of you indicated choral responses. Just be certain they're saying it together. However, when answers are long and different, Our benefit would be to have them say it to a partner. Now, because of COVID, you may want distance and not use partners at this moment, but someday we'll all be able to use partners, and it significantly increases the amount of language in our students. So, just like we did in that movie, that I assigned the partners. And if I have some low performing students in the class, it's best not to put them with the very highest performing student, but rather with a middle performing student. They're more likely to allow the lower performing student to participate. And you have to give them some designation. Now, I usually do 1s and 2s. But if you want to call them, like one day I was doing a webinar in Hawaii, and one teacher used sunshine and rainbow. Okay, it's very Hawaiian. You can use whatever you wish, but you do need to give them a designation so that you can say 1s tell your partner, 2s tell your partner, and they will not dominate. And they do need to sit near each other. One day I was in a class, it was a 2nd grade, and we just had the previous day active participation. The teacher was using choral responses and partners, and she said, 1s tell your partner. And all the kids got up and moved around the room. Now, if you look at the research on management, the hot spot for inappropriate behavior is in transitions. So we don't really want to significantly increase transitions. So just as in that video, the partner was right there, so I can just turn, and 1s can say the answer, and then 2s can respond. Now, sometimes you may want to set up a triad. Maybe you have an included special ed student that needs the support of the partners. So you have them be the 2 in the middle. When I say 1s say the answer, they say it to the 2s. When I say 2s, they talk it over, and the middle performing student, or the middle student then tells the answer. What else do we know about use of partners? Well, some other hints. In the video, I taught them to look at their partner, to lean towards their partner, and whisper. One teacher said, no, it should be look at your partner, lean to your partner, and either listen or whisper. Okay. But this one is one of the most critical ones. They're not partners for the whole year or even for a term. In all studies we looked at, every 3 to 6 weeks, the partners were changed. Now, this one's one I'm working on because one day I was doing the end note on a conference, and the person who did the keynote was a good friend of mine, Kevin Feldman, and he did it on active participation. And he said, one thing that we need to do is give both partners a job. So I'm going to, just for a moment, well, let's go through this first, and then I will talk about that. So this is the routine for partners that I use called Partners First. So the teacher asks a question. The teacher gives the students thinking time. They might indicate when they have come up with an answer. And then the teacher gives the students a sentence starter. Just like when I watched that teacher who said, the question is, what are the 3 branches of the federal government? And then the teacher said, think about it. And now you're going to say it to yourself, and you're going to start with the 3 branches of the federal government are, a sentence stem. And you could also give that sentence stem, as we would here, for the students to use to say an answer to their partner. And so they share it with their partners, then they're called on, setting them up for success. They practice with the partner, and then I call on them. And I might provide feedback to the student on their answer, or ask everybody else, do you agree or disagree with that response? So this one is, of all of the slides in this 75 slides, this one is the most important to utilize with partners. Now, what did I learn from Kevin Feldman? Well, I learned that it's useful to give both partners a job. So I'm really trying to do this. Ones, tell your partner your answer. Then twos, tell if you agree or disagree and why. Ones, tell your partner. Then twos, mirror back what your partner said in your own words. Ones, tell your partner how these are the same. Twos, say how they are different, so that both partners have a job. I just had fun brainstorming this after listening to Kevin, how we might give both groups, both sets, something to do. Partners are really incredibly helpful to get more verbal language out of your students, but it needs to be structured. Well, we could also have a discussion. Now, look at the high effect size of discussions from our first meeting. Wow. On a scale of 1 to 10, let me just get back here. Forgive me. 1, 0 to 1, 0.82 is one of the highest effect sizes, but it's when we do things that are optimum. So what does it mean that we have to do? Number one, when we look through all the studies and sort of drew out what they did that made this kind of difference, well, first, the teacher had a well-designed question. And so this was for a social studies class that I did, and forgive me, it was in 6th grade. When running for president, Andrew Jackson called himself the president for the common man. Do you agree or disagree with Jackson's campaign motto? And the students were able to pick agree or disagree. So it wasn't just a hip pocket, we've read this and I ask a question. It was a thoughtful question. And then in the studies we looked at, they found that if the students were given time to plan their discussion by actually writing down notes on their talking point, the quality of the discussion went way up. Well, of course, if I've thought about it and have in mind my talking points, it is going to enhance the discussion. But I love the next step. Each one of these is important, but the next step, if you read the readings that are done by Nancy Frey, and what they found was it was useful to have the students say their talking points to their partners. Because if I have a class of 22 fifth graders, maybe not everybody is going to enter the discussion, but all of them have, because they've already shared their talking points with their partner. And their partner might say, oh, that's a very good talking point. I'm going to add that. What else was useful? Well, giving them sentence starters. Many students have heard arguments, but not discussions. And so here are 2 studies that gave students sentence starters to help them have more civil responses in a discussion. This one came from a study done at University of Texas, Austin, where this was posted and so that the students would utilize civil responses like, I disagree with Pamela because, or I agree with Pamela, I also think this. Another researcher who would interest our intermediate teachers was Kate Kinsella at San Francisco University. And here, again, they had sentence starters for agreeing, disagreeing, clarifying, and paraphrasing. And if Loretta, you'll remind me, I'll send a little booklet that we printed up for students to have, and we'll send it to the teachers so that they could use, because it's so much nicer to say something like, that's stupid, versus, could you please clarify your idea for me? Very impressive. So the other thing that we found in a number of studies is they had some rules of conduct for a discussion. For example, when someone's speaking, you won't interrupt, but you will face them and look at them. And then you'll respond in a way that is civil, using language that would be positive. The only thing that we have consistently found is that if you have 22 children, that for big discussions, it would be better to break it into smaller groups. And so that they could do like a round. So here's our issue, and it starts with one child, and then the other students respond to them, and it moves to the next one to give one of their big talking points, and we respond to that, and around and around. So discussions can be made better, but good question. They write their talking points down, they share with their partner, they have sentence starters to help them with the language of a discussion. They have some rules of conduct, like not interrupting someone, and maybe breaking it down into smaller groups. Okay, can you believe, if I'm not right, it looks like our time is up. So, but I am going to stay for questions, and we're going to pick it up right here. But next time we're going to expand to not just opportunities to respond, but we're going to add how to monitor and how to give feedback. But first, as we're going to, if you want to stay and answer some questions, I'm going to do that right now, have a question and answer session. But I would like you to think, what were you reminded of? I'm certain with the group of teachers that I'm working with here, and you were just reminded to do something. Maybe it was, if you expected, pre-corrected. Maybe it was, oh, I should have them write down their talking points in our social studies 5th grade discussions, but add to the chat box 2 takeaways. But Loretta, I am going to whip over here, and we are going to come back and finish this off and add to it next time. And that was, are there any questions that popped into the chat box as I was talking?
The only question that popped into the chat box you answered in the body of the PD. They had asked, the person had asked, what do you do if you do not get a verbal response from the child? And you had said, you ask again.
Right, particularly on choral responses. Now, you might do something different if you call on a student and they say, I don't know. But if you preceded it by them saying an answer to their partner, they at least know what their partner said. But I also will give the students an opportunity to ask for assistance of their partner or someone else in class too, because we really want to set them up for success. Okay, now, if you have a question and you still are with me, just open up your voice and let me hear you, and we will respond to some other questions. It seemed to me like, Becky, you were sitting there with a question because I kept seeing your hand go up, but maybe not. So does anyone have a follow-up question?
I have a quick question about choosing partners. Hi.
Choosing partners, yes.
Choosing partners. What are your thoughts on choosing partners? How do you think that's allowable, or when should it be allowable?
So you mean letting the students choose the partners versus the teacher? Let me tell you this, Michelle, and you as a principal would be as concerned about this too. I never want a child to be not called on, not asked, ever. That is a devastating situation. Now, I might, so most often I'll pick the partners, and I'll go directly to the studies that were done by Doug and Lynn Fuchs. And what they did is this for the partners. They took paper and they listed from highest fluency to lowest fluency in their class, because they found whether it was social studies or science or math or language arts. That one of the things that was important was your accuracy and your fluency in reading. So they used that as a marker. They listed the kids. Then they wanted the lowest kids not to be with the highest, but rather to be with middle performing students. So they ripped it in half, maybe scissors would have helped, and then lined up the two pieces. And they were then the partners, so that the lowest performing students were with middle performing students. Now, that's an excellent way to get partners, but then you might want to look at it and say, all right, that's Josh and Stefan. Oh my God, they shouldn't even be at the same school. They definitely shouldn't be in the same room. They definitely should not be partners. And you make another choice. So, you know, the challenge is, it's just, I mean, I have some friends who were never picked to play games in PE. And it was devastating. I mean, they still remember it. And so I don't need to give the kids that experience. They have enough socialization challenges without me creating more. Okay, did anybody else have a question? Okay, so, you know, so today, as I was going through this right before I presented it, when I polished it up last night and then went through it, I said, oh, maybe we shouldn't watch the movie because it's going to take too much time. But I'm very glad we did, because it reminded us of something really critical, and that is we teach academics and we teach behavior. And oftentimes we choose not to teach behavior. We create and actually create a sumicide. We just assume it. And yet, taking that 6 minutes to teach the students how to respond to a partner and together, boy, that's the best 6 minutes I've ever spent as a teacher. And so we do want to not just assume it, we want to teach it. Okay, so, well, except for Laura, Kim, Loretta, Becky, Michelle, Tabitha, and any principals who are here or assistant principals, they're going to hang out. We're going to say goodbye to everyone else. Thank you for being here. I'll see you. I think is our next session, Loretta, next week? 2 weeks. 2 weeks from now. And it is on the end of opportunities to respond, and then looking at monitoring and feedback. And feedback is really important in terms of the research on praise, the research on corrections, and the research on being informative. All right.
Ms. Archer, as we give everyone a chance to log off and just the administrators to stick around, I think probably at this point, I'll go ahead and stop the recording.
I think that's great.
All right.
Thank you. Thank you.
Milton Union teachers, if you're still on